everyone, Drew's Apiary here. We're out here at, shoot, I'm trying to remember what this apiary yard's called now at this point, but I guess this was the 4th yard, so it's now the 3rd yard since we don't have that 1st yard anymore. But I just want to give you guys a quick update the way things are going out here. This is definitely one of the bigger yards. A lot more hives here. In fact, right here there are, let's see, 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. There's 19 hives out here, but I think 2 of those don't have anything in it. So really just 17 colonies out here. There's some that don't. But we're out here at probably one of the busier yards. Today is May the 11th. It is we're full in it here in Georgia. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of other videos that are mentioning the same thing, but here, at least in this part of Georgia, like I said, we're in north central Georgia, we are in the flow. When I checked these hives on May the 1st, you know, there was definitely nectar coming in. I knew that was the beginning of the flow, but it wasn't, you know, I had a lot of boxes at several of my yards where while stuff was getting filled in, nothing was packed to the gills. And just in the past 10 days, I've had to either add space with, you know, extra supers or whatever equipment I had to give them some more room, but the flow is 100% here. And that's great because we had such a delay with all the cool weather that we've had here in Georgia. We had that cool spell twice, really. The last one being in middle of April that lasted almost 2 weeks, where we'd get lows in the 40s and highs in the low 60s, and the bees didn't know what to do. They weren't really bringing anything in at that time. And once that was over, you know, we're full on, and you know, our lows now are in the high 50s, low 60s, and our highs are in the 80s now. So, you know, it's definitely that type of weather where, you know, spring, you know, almost summer's here. Not exactly sure how long this flow is going to last. Last year, our flow was middle of April till maybe the 1st week of June. This year, we're saying it started in late April, early May. Who knows how long it'll last? I don't know if things will be delayed or if we'll have just a really short nectar flow, but we can only cross our fingers and hope that it's long enough for hives, especially ones that are smaller, to build up the foragers that they can take advantage of the nectar flow. Because, you know, this is a big time for beekeepers to get their primary source of nectar for the bees that hopefully will become honey and that they'll be able to harvest in the summer for either for sale or whatever they're going to do, or really just for beekeepers that aren't necessarily trying to sell any honey, just for the colonies themselves to build up for the rest of the year. Because anyone that can tell you who's been in, like, at least the dearth in the summer, you know, you're potentially not going to get any more really natural stuff, or something so minuscule you're just going to be feeding nonstop from basically the time the flow is done till you put the bees to bed for winter. So, you know, this is the time for the bees to kind of establish themselves, of getting their stores up for either making it through the dearth and ultimately making it through the fall going into the winter, depending on how much supplemental feeding you're willing to do. Some beekeepers don't like to do a lot of feeding. I myself, I do, but I definitely felt like I took too much honey from them last year, and we didn't have a fall flow. Really, I mean, like there was some pollen that was coming in, but we didn't really have a nectar flow in the fall from goldenrod or anything like that last year, at least in my area. And so I definitely lost some colonies due to just not big enough clusters. You know, like the queens didn't have enough food to go around to lay enough bees, and not enough bees going into winter means bees are going to freeze to death. And I definitely lost some colonies. I'm sure many of y'all may have as well. But we're just out here today. I just wanted to announce that the nectar flow is going. I'm going to be adding some boxes, so you might see that. I'm also going to be doing some pre-treatment for hive beetles. So this right here is just a normal sprayer that I got at like a Lowe's, Home Depot. This is filled with, you know, roughly 1-to-1 pool salt and water. You know, there's different ways to combat hive beetles, but what we're going to be doing, and you'll see this, is I'm going to be going around the base of these hives and spraying with this solution. Because if you know anything about hive beetles or their development, one of the big stages of when a hive beetle, you know, she's going to lay eggs in the hive, right? Well, when the larva hatches, part of its production process, reproduction or its growth, is it needs to exit the hive, get into the ground where it'll mature into an adult hive beetle. So if you're able to salt the earth, so to speak, below that, below the hive, because primarily they're going to be within a, I believe it's a 8 to 10 foot radius is where when the beetle larva comes out of the hive, it's going to get into the ground, and that's where it's going to pupate, that's where it's going to grow. If you salt the earth where that larva potentially can go, there's not going to be any way when the larva hits the ground for them to get into the ground and be able to do that. They're just going to dry out and die, or make themselves very vulnerable to, you know, ants or other predators that might try to come by and grab them, which is what we hope will happen. So we're going to get on top of this now. Here in Georgia, hive beetle season is usually full on middle of June, at least from what I've noticed. But I'm already starting to see a hive beetle here and there in some of my hives. It's usually just like one loner, but once you start seeing them now, it's only a matter of time in the reproductive cycle where the population can explode. So you kind of got to get on top of it. I've done nematodes in the past. Those have worked very well, but they do cost a lot more to do. And the problem is the nematodes that you put in the ground that you can usually buy from an insectary, they don't last that long. You know, you might get a couple months out of it. This pool salt, you know, you reapply it a couple times throughout the year, specifically starting now through the summer months, maybe like once a month, and hopefully you can stay on top of it that way. But without further ado, I'm going to get started. I'm going to first do the salt that we were just talking about, and then I'll show you some hives in here regarding where we're at with the flow. So like I said, really all we're doing, like I said, 1-to-1. You can change that ratio if you need to, but that's all that's in the sprayer. And again, we just want to get all of the ground around it covered in this solution. And you know, yard this big, I'm definitely gonna have to refill this container quite a bit. It'll definitely kill any plant life, you know, once you salt the earth, or should, underneath. But you want to get a good area covered in this. And we're just going to walk hive to hive. Like I said, salt the earth around it as best you can. You know, if you're willing to go further out and spend more time and energy getting further away from the hive, you know, all the better. It's just going to further your chances of hopefully getting any of the larvae, because you know, when the larva hits the ground, it's going to crawl and try to burrow into the ground. You know, they say, like, I think it's like 80 to 90% of the larva that matures is within several feet of the origin hive. The rest might be a little bit further, but if we can get most of them, then all the better. And again, there's probably better sprayers than this. This thing's not the best. I have to keep pumping, keep refilling, but it is an essential first step. So like I said, I'm just gonna go down the line, do this with all the hives in preparation for the hive beetle season. So I'm gonna do some quick checks. Like I said, we're really just seeing which of these hives is gonna be expanded with some of the boxes that I brought. This was a swarm capture. They have a recently hatched queen. When I say that, that statement doesn't make any sense. You know, usually when you catch a swarm, there's already a queen in it, but I think something will happen with this one after I caught it. Not sure exactly, but they ended up making a new one. So I'm just doing a quick check to see how full this is since the last visit. They still have some room. I'll show you this. You can kind of see here, got a decent amount of bees. You know, they're covering about 6 to 7 frames in the middle, but there is some undrawn wax here, some undrawn wax there. They are not going to get expanded. So I'm just going to close that up. We're not going to do a check. Like I said, this is just, we're just here seeing, because of the flow, who needs room, who's got a booming population that if I don't give them any expansion, there'll be problems. These two I wouldn't worry about right now. That's a mini mating nuc, a 2-frame nuc. Nothing we need to worry about right there. I'm gonna do a quick check on this green and blue right here. Let's see. Like I said, I've caught quite a few swarms. I've lost a few of my own swarms as well. That's the problem when you're managing a bunch of hives. Unless you're on it every like 5 days. Because honestly, I'm of the mindset if you're really doing a good job of looking for swarms, you kind of do have to be in them every 5. Then be prepared to lose some bees. You can't do that. About the same. They're drawing it out, which is good. They do not need another box. Makes my life easier. Let's see. We're gonna flip this around. Okay. And yeah, I'm just gonna put this on a timer until I show you something good that's worth showing you in regards to a full hive. All right, that's pretty much for this yard right now. Not as much expanding as I needed to do. Pretty much I went through all these. I know it was a very quick time lapse, usually is. But basically I was just checking the top box on every hive, seeing how full they were. There was nothing really worth showing you all. I usually look to see if it's looking about 3/4 of the way full before I add another box. This was the only one that I gave an extra one to. All the others, I gave them an extra box if they needed it 10 days ago, whenever the last visit was. And you know, they're working it, but they're not in the spot, even with being in the flow, that they would need a box. So, you know, maybe in 2 weeks time or whenever I get out here next, they might need it. But pretty much here, there's not much else that really needs to be done. I'm gonna show you one other thing while I'm here. I've shown it in an old video, but I'm gonna put out a full few pollen traps. Right here I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 8 hives that do it, but only 7 that I'm gonna do it with, I think. I'm gonna bring them down. And I'm gonna show you a quick thing with these pollen traps, because I'm gonna try it. This is the time of the year to get it. You know, once the flow is done, pollen season's over, there's really no point of trying to collect any. So let me show you that real quick and we'll move on to a different yard. All right, right out here, I was gonna, like I said, show you something with these Apimaye bottoms. I brought out some components that are not currently in place. So I'm gonna show you more about it. But this hive right here is one of the stronger ones. In fact, these two are doing pretty good. I'll talk about this one in a second. There's 2 down there that have Apimaye bottoms as well that are in pretty good shape. I love these. I've mentioned that before in a previous video. They are very useful. They're very expensive, unfortunately, so I don't have very many. But for someone like me who does collect pollen, these are extremely useful. You can kind of see some residual pollen that's already fallen down here. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna be able to use any of that because it's basically waste at this point. But what I wanted to talk about is situations where you would, or maybe you wouldn't, collect this. So like I said, this is a strong colony. I'm okay with taking some, because remember, you don't want to take all, some pollen from them. If I was fully utilizing this trap, you would want to empty it every other day. Especially the warmer it gets, you know, pollen can spoil. So you want to make sure that you are checking it semi-frequently. This is the bin that actually collects the pollen. When it drops down, it goes into here. Just so you guys understand what I'm about to do. So, clean that out. Got that in place. This is a strong colony. Bees eat the pollen, you know, they eat the nectar, you know, to make a bee bread, so to speak. They, you know, raise their young with it. And so if you've got a very strong colony, it's okay to take some. You never want to take all. But if you have a weak colony, this is a colony that's in the process of making a queen. So they're already weak to begin with. I would not recommend you collect pollen of any capacity from a weak colony or a weekend colony. Doesn't matter how it seems, but just keep that in mind. You know, I use pollen for, you know, as like a food dietary supplement. You know, I sometimes will sell it, but it's definitely something you really only collect in the spring months, and it's just a side thing. It's just like if it's something you enjoy, great. It's a great health food, but you never want to get greedy with the bees. So I put the trap in. I'm gonna take this plug out right here. That's what this little red piece is right here. Okay, plug is out. So right now bees could come out of there, and they probably will. But I'm going to do this. This thing tells you which way it's gonna go in. I'm gonna put it like that. And I'm gonna slowly whittle its way in. Oh, there we go. Little by little, because again, if you go in too fast, you know, the bees will move out of the way as you go in there. That's about as far as I'll go with it. Right there. Reason being is if this thing went all the way in, there would be no pollen that would be coming in for the bees. But I like this amount because it traps some. Bees are still going in and bringing in pollen, but some is getting collected and distributed on the bottom. Make sense? You know, this is going to cover basically the middle area of the hive. As the bees come in, they've got to walk under this until they get up these holes. So by this not being fully seated all the way to the front, there's actually some gap space that when they enter in, they're still bringing pollen up into the hive. But there's some that are going to walk forward, walk underneath this, and then walk up, and then ultimately the pollen's going to drop off their legs. And again, that gets me a percentage of it, which is what I want. I don't want to take too much, and I'm probably only going to do this for about a month. It's, like I said, it's May 11th right now. Come mid-June, this is going to be kind of pointless to do. I did not get on top of this year of doing pollen collecting. I should have started a month ago, but the weather really was not cooperating. We weren't, pollen either was coming in or it wasn't coming in. And so I unfortunately have all these pollen collecting tools that I've not really been utilizing. But these Apimaye bottom boards are great for other reasons, pest control, monitoring. Varroa might drop, so I think they're a great piece of equipment. They're plastic, so they'll last basically forever as long as you take care of them. But I just wanted to go over when and when not to. So again, weak hive, don't collect it. You can use the bot, but like, you know, keep the plug in the back, you know, this thing. And don't take any pollen from your bees if that's the case. But if they're strong and they have some, just, you know, to spare, you can do that and just make sure you stay on top of it as best you can as far as the collecting goes. So just want to share that. But again, we will get ready to go to the next yard. I might have one other thing to show you before we go, but then we'll move on. Just want to share one of my little swarm traps over here. See it's kind of hard to see, but back there is the yard we were just at through those trees. I know I can't really zoom all that great, but see there's a little bit of a few bees hanging out. I don't think this one has just caught a swarm. I know there's bees hanging on it. I think it's just straggler bees. The last swarm I caught from here was a couple weeks ago, and I think during the move, some of the bees that didn't want to make the move kept flying back to here. Not many, but I noticed that there were definitely some. So just kind of wanted to share that, just like in that last video where I had some bees left over in that tree house, these are some bees that are just kind of hanging out, living out their days in retirement out here at the swarm trap. So when I opened it up a couple weeks ago, like I said, there's maybe like 2 drawn frames. You know, they're just in there storing nectar. There's no queen, but like I said, they're just kind of like a little colony out here in the woods. They're just living out their final days. But this trap's already caught 2 swarms, so most likely mine. But honestly, I thought just kind of wanted to share that. You know, we are still in swarm season. I've definitely mentioned earlier in the video that definitely had a few swarm on me, and again, definitely have caught a few. But you know, at least for the next month or so, it's still prime time. So if you've got your traps out, you know, keep leaving them out at least for a bit longer. The impulse has definitely died down a little bit compared to what it used to be, but it's still definitely present. So without further ado, we'll go to the next yard. All right, here we are out at, I guess it's Apiary yard number 2. I have to get used to start renaming all these. So this yard, like I said, it was probably out a week ago. Just expanding out. I want to show you just one of these hives to see what the nectar flow, honey flow, how that's looking, because this middle box right here, we're going to give them another box of extra space. So all these hives have a queen, except they're either finishing up the process or maybe they have one now and she hasn't been mated, but I'm not going to open it up that far, right, little one. They've always been the problem child, and we're going to leave them be at least for a little bit longer. But I'm going to pop this open. I'm going to show you some frames up close so you guys see exactly what we're working with. but this has been a good yard so far. Last year we didn't get much honey. Maybe that'll change this year. They're definitely drawing things out, and I think it's just because we got a late start last year with them out here. But now that they're so established, and we got a few new colonies on the other side that you saw at the beginning of the video, those ones are doing very well as well. So without further ado, we'll go into the middle. All right, show you inside this one. Exploding with bees. Look at all that. Lots of bees. So they absolutely need a new box. All right. This hive last year was my strongest, so it makes sense that it's the same this year. It is requeened. And like I said, it may have swarmed once earlier this summer, but this one might have been one that I just caught in time and did the split before it did. But again, just look at this. I'm gonna pull one frame out as an example, just to show you all what the flow is looking like in most of these hives. And look at that. See, they're just starting to cap it. They're probably halfway through capping. I've got boxes out here where they're completely covered, like they're completely capped over. So they've got almost no room to do anything else. This will definitely be a good honey producer this year. Let's give them a box. Make sure our frames are decently spaced. I don't have my spacer with me, but let's get them as good as we can. That'll give them a lot to do. I'm also flipping my covers. Not all of y'all have a notched inner cover. During the cold months, I leave it pointing up, and I usually push the lid to the side to close it up and just let this be the ventilation. But now that we're in the middle of the flow, I put it so that the notch is below, so we have a small upper entrance for the bees to come in and out, especially during the nectar flow. You want as much foot traffic as you can get, and if you have another location, that just makes the bees' jobs a lot easier than having to go all the way to the bottom, climb all the way to the top to deliver nectar, when they could just do it from the top. So get them closed up. Yeah, like I said, I'm very pleased with this hive. Super strong. Definitely had eggs and a queen in there on my last inspection a week ago. One more yard, that's it, and we will do final thoughts. All right, here we are over at yard number 2. You can see from last year, if you remember, this was a much longer stretch. Right now it's just 4 over here, and the rest, which we'll go over to in a bit, is over in that corner. But this has been a very interesting area. Like I said, we had a lot of loss this past fall from this yard, but these 2 hives killed it. They did very strong, and in fact they've been booming this spring. I'm about to give them another box right now, or at least this one in their box. This one unfortunately swarmed pretty recently, sometime in the past week or 2. So they're in the process. They either have a new queen in there that hasn't been mated, but I'm not going to check right now. So those 2 are splits. So we're going to go into this one real quick. Not really inspect it. I'm probably just going to add the box. It's probably not going to get any taller than that. I don't usually like to go much higher than 4, and those are deep bodies. Those aren't supers, so it's far as deeps are concerned, I wouldn't go any higher than that for me. And then we'll go over to that area and I'll do a little bit of talking about that area. All right, now this area, newly being utilized, it's on the left side of this yard, depending on how you look at it. This hive is, I'm not sure if I mentioned it in the previous video or not. This hive is very interesting. Previously owned, basically from what I understand, it was kind of just like left on a horse farm in the woods. I got to help move it over here, but it was basically unattended for 2 years, maybe more, hard to say. But when we got it, it was deep, super massive. I mean, like, this thing was heavy as can be, probably the heaviest hive I've ever tried to lift, given, you know, when you start adding that many boxes, it does get heavy. But even still, this was just one of the craziest weight I've ever seen, more propolis than I've ever seen. Somehow this hive has been untreated for the past 2 years as well. So, you know, there's a good chance it might have some, you know, Varroa hygenic behavior for them to survive this long and to not suffer from a colony collapse. I'll probably do a shake on them before I start giving them the test, or I'm sorry, before I harvest this summer. So, or, you know, post-harvest, whichever ends up being. But this hive is booming with bees, easily the biggest colony of all the colonies across all the yards. And yeah, like I said, they're just killing it. So, you know, I'm trying to use the genetics from this hive to make other queens. So this orange one was requeened with the genetics from this hive. Same with that yellow rock one over there. So basically doing a little test to see if that I can start to spread those genes across the board to some of my other hives. This box right here, the super, was only put on a week ago, and already it's relatively full. So I'm gonna give them one more box and see what they can do, and that might be the last box I give them. I mean, this is absurdly tall. If you look, it's a deep and 4 supers, and I've got another deep box that I'm gonna throw on there just to give them something else to do, but it is gonna be absurdly tall. All these other hives have been doing fine, like I said, minus some swarming or requeening. I forget, one of these two swarmed in the past week or two. Just missed them. I think it might be this one right here. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'm just going to add the box on top of this and close her up, and I'll give final thoughts. All right, that's pretty much it. Just wanted to share where everything was at here in the flow. You know, not really catching any more swarms, but they're still out there. But yeah, right now the only focus is getting your hives basically at the point where they can take advantage of all this fresh nectar in preparation for going through a dearth this summer. So hope you all enjoyed the video. Hope your bees are doing good. Just wanted to give you an update of where things were at for my stuff. And if you have any questions, leave below, and I'll make sure to respond as quickly as I can. Thank you so much. You guys have a great week. Take care. Talk to you on the next one.